It's a mock draft Monday, and everyone thinks after last week it's going to be wide receiver at 6. I try that out coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. After the Browns overhauled their O-line last week, everyone seems to think wide receiver is now a lock for the Browns at 6. So that's what I tried. How does the board fall from there? I'll take you round by round through my latest mock draft here on a Mock Draft Monday. I also want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, which is giving you a way to turn that energy into an even bigger potential win with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Just head to FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thanks for making Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. All right, my latest mock draft is complete. I'm going to pull it up here on the screen in just a second, but to frame this one, I went off of the premise, listen, we're about a week into free agency here, and I went off the premise that everyone's kind of been espousing at this point that, listen, the Browns spent so many resources in free agency already trying to fix this offensive line. They add Tytus Howard via the trade. They get Zion Johnson in free agency. They sign Elton Jenkins in free agency, and these moves kind of set up now. Okay, the offensive line has kind of set it, and not set it and forget it, because we know there's still some holes to fill, and I still tend to believe that that could still be on the menu because they've made it clear their number one priority is this offensive line. Why not finish it off at the draft? But in leaning into the premise that, listen, they've already invested a lot of resources in the offensive line, maybe that sets the stage for they really like one of these wide receivers and they're going to pull the trigger on one early. I tried that path with this latest mock draft, and when the Browns were up at 6, I took a wide receiver, and I kind of went from there through the rest of this mock experience to put together a draft that I actually think turned out pretty solid when push came to shove and we got to the end of it. So here's how things started out, and I know a lot of people are going to be excited about who my first pick is at 6 overall. It's Carnell Tate, wide receiver out of Ohio State, who I do think is one of the better receivers in this draft. I've been saying for a while now, though, for me, Jordan Tyson's my favorite receiver in this draft. Just the way I feel about it. People can disagree. If you can find a way to look past the injuries, which I know is a big if because it's one of the biggest red flags for any team looking to draft a player, is if they have a bad injury history, not so great. You don't feel great about that, bringing them into the NFL. So I understand that maybe is a flawed thought because some people aren't as sold on Jordan Tyson, but I think those top 3 guys, Tyson, Tate, and Mackay Lemon, are all pretty close when it comes to how they shake out in the rankings, how they shake out on the big boards for teams, and for me personally, like if you took any one of those 3, I'd be okay with it. And frankly, there's about 6 receivers at the top of this board that I would be okay with the Browns ending up with in some way, shape, or form of this draft. So that's one of the reasons why I still don't necessarily think offensive line is off the table at 6, or if they were to trade back into the early teens and then draft an offensive lineman over a receiver, I don't think it's off the table because I think there's other receivers that I still like that you could probably get at 24, i.e. my guy from Indiana, Omar Cooper Jr., who I love. There's other options when you get to the 20s that could still be on the board, and I think there's a lot of receivers that I feel good about potentially in this first round, whether it's late or early, that you could take. But for the sake of trying out this theory that, hey, they invested a lot of resources in the O-line already, let's go wide receiver with this first pick, I tried to see how things would fall if I ended up taking Carnell Tate at 6. And I actually think how things shook out from here turned out pretty nicely. I got to 24, and I really did think about doubling up on the wide receiver position and taking Omar Cooper Jr. But Avion Terrell is one of the top corners in this class without question. And I do think Andrew Berry is going to take a corner in this draft. Whether it's thinking ahead on Denzel Ward and where he kind of stands and his future and how he's getting up there in age, or whether it's just they need somebody who can be their slot guy, and and Andrew Berry generally likes to draft corners. Last year was the first year, I believe, since he's been in Cleveland, that he didn't draft a corner. I liked the Terrell pick here, given the value. Some people are mocking him even earlier in this draft. Some people are mocking him a little bit later. But I think the value was there, and so this became kind of like a best player available situation because I liked some of the linemen that were still available at this time, and you'll see when I get to the second round where I where I ended up getting that offensive lineman that I'm looking for, that tackle that I'm looking for. So we'll talk about that here in the next segment. But as far as these first two picks are concerned, not a bad way for the board to fall, all things considered, where you get Carnell Tate at 6. You go best player available at 24 because you felt like there were still some guys available that you could get later at the tackle spot if you wait on that a little bit longer. And I'm not mad about the way that kind of shook out for me. And again, I'm open to Tate. It's my feeling on the wide receivers isn't that I'm against Tate at all. I love Carnell Tate and I love his game. He'd be that Z or X that the Browns have been sort of missing that can make plays downfield. And I know there's been a lot said about his 40 time, but the tape tells all. He is a guy that gets open without needing to be explosively fast, and I think that is important. Like it's not just his speed that made him an effective player at Ohio State. His route running is really good, so I feel good about if somebody was to take him, or if the Browns were to take him at 6. I just think ultimately, I do think that tackle is still very much in play at 6 as things stand. But for the sake of this exercise, I did it. End up with Avian Terrell as well, who I think is going to be a solid guy. He's got great athleticism and size. He can play inside or outside, so there's some versatility there. He doesn't always defend on 50-50 balls well, but listen, every young player is coming in with something that they need to work on a little bit. And I think getting a young guy in here that you can sort of nurture and learn or help learn, maybe in that slot spot primarily, would be beneficial. And like I said, Andrew Berry just loves drafting corners, and I think he does have to start thinking about the future there. That's the thing. Everyone's just saying offense, and I do agree those are your biggest needs, so you got to address them with premier top-end picks. But I also think that Andrew Berry's now kind of put himself in a spot with how he's built the offensive line to potentially be able to go best player available, even maybe at 6 if he feels inclined to, and get some of these other needs that they have later. And they could theoretically do that with going best player available if it's a defensive guy at 6, and then getting tackle or receiver later because you feel good about the guys that could be there 24 at maybe one of the spots, and then you feel good about the guys that could be there in the second round at the other spot. It's all kind of very fluid, but I'm not mad about the way this shook out. Come away with one of the top cornerbacks in the class, start sort of replenishing that secondary a little bit, thinking about the future as Denzel Ward gets a little bit older, and you still get one of the best receivers in the class, and you come away with two big sort of picks and moves made to continue to bolster this roster. Finally, offensive lineman is in play for me when I get to the second round, and I actually have to trade up to get the guy that I wanted based on what was left. I'll talk about that and what played out in the third round as well in my latest mock draft here on the Locked On Browns podcast. College basketball is non-stop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into an even bigger potential payout with the college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want. Rivalries, ranked matchups, whatever fits your read. You can mix spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see the slate playing out. Then you can apply the profit boost and instantly bump up your potential payouts. Look at the odds around maybe your favorite team if they're in the tournament and see if you feel confident betting on them and using that profit boost. You know what month it is. So go safe, go bold, ride with the team that you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. All right, we go to the second day of my latest mock draft. I've addressed wide receiver. I got Carnell Tate. Came away with Avian Terrell as a corner with my second first round pick. And I know that's not the biggest pressing need. It was a value pick at the time based on what was there on the board. And I feel like corner is very much going to be in play for Andrew Berry. I will say this. I wouldn't mind if they got D'Angelo Pons on like as like a day 2 guy if they were to address the cornerback spot later. But I don't hate this iteration so far and how things are kind of shaking out in this mock. So we'll keep it going here with my second round pick. And so I made the decision based on some of the teams that were in front of me and some of the needs that I knew they had to trade up with the Arizona Cardinals from 39 to 34. I gave up a 6th rounder this year I gave up a 5th rounder this year. One of my 5th rounders, pick 144, got a 6th rounder in 2027 back from the Cardinals as well to sort of sweeten the deal and push it over the top. And it's just trading back, 5 spots or for them, 5 spots up for the Browns. And I put myself in position at 34 to then take tackle Caleb Lomu out of Utah, who was the left tackle at Utah. And I was kind of surprised he was still on the board at this point, which is why I made the trade up, because I didn't know if he was going to make it to me or not. I wasn't so worried about the first 2 teams of the round taking a tackle, but I was worried about some of the teams coming up, including Arizona. So I decided to make this pick and trade back up to get him because, again, I still think, even though they've invested a lot of resources in the offensive line, they're still going into the draft, it feels, looking for a left tackle. I should have also told you, because I know I've been very much riding the Monroe Freeling hype train, like everybody else, I guess. But Freeling went to the Ravens at pick 14. So that kind of gives you a sense, I think, in this mock where he's kind of going and why I think it would be okay if the Browns took him at 6 if they were to go that route. But also if they traded back into the early teens, maybe that's an opportunity to still get him if they wanted to accumulate some picks for next year. And so tackle, I think, is still in play for the Browns for sure early on. But the way this board fell, I was okay waiting because Caleb Lomu was still there when I picked Terrell. Also still there was Caden Proctor at the time. He actually went late first round. But Lomu was still there, and I took him, snagged him to get myself a left tackle and try to solidify that spot finally with another offensive lineman to finish off that offensive line that we think has been largely overhauled to this point. Maybe my one regret about this mock as a whole, which you'll see play out here on the card, is that I didn't draft another lineman at some point. The value as I got later in this thing wasn't there for some of these guys. That's probably my one regret, that I didn't bolster up more there, because I do think multiple offensive linemen very much in play for the Browns in this draft because of where they're at as an offensive line group as a whole, and then it's always good to have depth there. But in the grand scheme of things, yeah, I felt like this was a solid pick, right move to trade up and get him, and I come away with Lomu to be my starting left tackle moving forward for the Cleveland Browns. And I've addressed a lot of needs so far, the 2 biggest at wide receiver and tackle, and we keep on rolling into the 3rd round now. So I've mocked Zachariah Branch to the Browns a couple times now. Part of the reason why Andrew Berry has a history of drafting and having an infatuation with some of these speedy wide receivers. Zachariah Branch ran one of the fastest 40 times at the combine, and I think that this is a value pick at this point too, him being available at this point on day 3. And by the way, I traded back with the Buccaneers and still got him. The Buccaneers wanted to come up to 70, so I gave them my 7th rounder, pick 70, and got their third rounder 77 and a 4th rounder in their 4th rounder this year 116 to move up, or for them to move up and me to move back. And it set me up with pick 77, where Zachariah Branch was still available, snagged him, and I've now used 2 picks on receivers to add to this room some talented players that I think could be contributors pretty quickly. Again, Andrew Berry in the speedy receivers thing is I think, a real tendency. We saw it with Anthony Schwartz, didn't work out. He obviously signed Isaiah Bond last year when he became available after his legal situation played out. Still to be determined. But right now, it feels like he can only really run one route, which is kind of like a seam, and that's about it. You could use a guy like Zachariah Branch and see what he brings to the table in terms of his route tree. I don't know that he was asked to run a complex route tree at this point. And a lot of his targets did come behind the line of scrimmage at Georgia, so that's notable. But I think a lot of that was about getting him in space because he was so fast. And because you added Carnell Tate, you can use him in different ways. I keep talking about like Todd Monken using some of these gadget type receivers like a Malachi Corley, just to name one, and some of these other guys that could be out there, Zachariah Branch if they were to draft him. I love the idea of that and seeing how he tries to maximize those guys and what he gets out of them and creative things he can do with them. So I think this pick makes a lot of sense. The value was there. I pulled the trigger. And so Zachariah Branch, the third round pick of the Cleveland Browns, I get him at 77. And I've now invested the first 4 picks, going 2 wide receivers. I got a tackle out of it that likely would start for you at left tackle. And I get a corner to just sort of start thinking ahead in the future, or at least fill a void at the slot spot for this year with Avian Terrell. And this draft sort of feels like it's playing out in a decent fashion at this stage as we get ready for day 3 and what's to kind of come on that front, where I do find myself drafting a quarterback. Yes, I did draft a quarterback. The market has not gone away where the Browns really were investing resources in trying to sign one. I'm starting to think that drafting one could very much be in play, and Todd Monken gets a guy in here that he wants to sort of draft and develop out of this class. I know there's been a lot of Ty Simpson smoke, but I take a different quarterback on day 3 of my mock, and I'll tell you who that is coming up next. I do quickly, though, want to remind you to join the Everydayer Club now with code MARCH, MARCH, and get your first month free. If you sign up before the NCAA tournament tips off this Thursday, you can compete against me and others in our network in our men's and women's bracket pools on Discord. The winner in each will get $100 in Locked On merch. The rest of us can commiserate in the members-only chats as the brackets blow up. You can share your thoughts as the tournament plays out, and obviously talk about the Browns in those Discord channels as well. So make sure you sign up today, get your first month free with the code MARCH, and then $5 after that to get the show ad-free on whatever audio platform you choose. We get to day 3 of my latest mock draft on a Mock Draft Monday. What quarterback do I find myself taking on day 3? Find out next on the Locked On Browns podcast. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is, well, let's just call a spade a spade. It's a lot. Trying to book an appointment, that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers and emailing back and forth and wondering if the person really gets your situation, frankly. I understand how that works. I'm an independent contractor. I have a lot of different forms that I use, and sometimes I've wondered, will this person understand where I'm coming from and everything that I'm throwing at them? But this year, I'm getting a major upgrade. You're getting a major upgrade because Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in, meeting a real person, and walking out. No taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. All right, day 3 of my latest mock draft. And this one certainly comes with a pick that'll probably be a little controversial because I know how everyone feels about the quarterback room and how things stand right now. But I did find myself taking a quarterback on day 3 of this draft, and it kind of became like a why not situation. And that's actually my very next pick. Round 4, pick 107. I think this pick, I think it still is 107. All the compensatory picks came out last week, and so some of this stuff shifted around, and I don't think that PFF is accounted for that totally yet, so it is what it is. But Garrett Nussmeier, my pick at 107, another day 3. Yeah, I mean, they took Shedeur Sanders on day 3 last year. I was thinking of Dylan Gabriel, but he was just on the fringe of being a day 2 guy. But Garrett Nussmeier is my pick at 107. And I've talked about this ad nauseum. Garrett Nussmeier was easily my favorite quarterback going into the regular season of college football this year. that I thought was for sure coming out. Like, I didn't know about some of these other guys. Everyone kept talking about Arch. I didn't think that was a guarantee, and obviously it wasn't. Everyone kept talking about Lenore Sellers, same thing. I didn't know for sure he was coming out, but I do like Lenore Sellers. But Nussmeier, I felt like, was the most pro-ready of all these guys. Injuries kind of derailed his season. We know that. And he did himself some favors at the Combine, and I think he's going to continue to do himself some favors as he goes through the pre-draft process, meets with teams. And I think Nussmeier could be somebody that is available as a day 3 guy potentially. It's all going to be about where these teams value the quarterback, which it's always overvalued to a degree. So maybe he goes earlier. But when he was there at 107 and I'm on the clock, I'm sitting there and I'm like, listen, at this point you might as well just take him. And I've not been, I haven't been coy about the fact that I think Dylan Gabriel is kind of the odd man out of this group right now, that at some point I could see them maybe trading him. The idea of having 3 young guys who are within the first 2 years of their NFL careers is not necessarily an appealing quarterback situation, but I don't think that one of them is going to be here anyway. So I don't think it's the end of the world. And this is basically like a chance for Todd Monken to find a guy maybe he really likes in this draft him and say, this is a guy I'm going to develop. And it's a day 3 pick at this point, right? Like there is something to be said. I know everyone looks at these picks and they say, well, you're wasting a 4th round pick, or you're wasting a 5th round pick, or you're wasting a day 3 pick. Guys, there is something to be said for the mentality of you draft a quarterback every year until you know for sure you have your franchise guy. And the Browns are obviously still trying to figure that out. I hope Shedeur Sanders seizes the job and he goes out and proves that he can be that guy. But they don't have an answer to that question yet. And if the worst thing that comes out of this is Garrett Nussmeier becomes a pretty solid backup and then you can trade him later for something, who's going to care about that? So the value is there. I still think the Browns are adding to this quarterback room in some capacity. They haven't signed anybody just yet in free agency. So drafting a guy feels very much in play. And I think Nussmeier, this late in the draft especially, very much an option for the Browns. And I like the pick here. I still feel really good about his upside because of the injuries he had last year, and I'd be interested to see what he can do, especially under Tom Monken's tutelage. Staying in round 4 because of the trade I made, with the Tampa Bay Bucks, I also get pick 116. So I'm picking 9 picks later, and there was a couple interesting options on the board at this point. But I felt like this was the right time to maybe go back to the defensive side of things. And I do believe that the Browns, and Andrew Berry's kind of proven this over the years, the Browns love to bolster the defensive line. They like depth there for obvious reasons. Nowadays, those groups get rotated constantly. And so DeMonte Capehart was there from Clemson. And listen, I'm enamored by him because of his RAS, his relative athletic score that came out of the scouting combine, graded elite with his 40-yard dash time as a defensive tackle at his size, 313, and he was running a 4.85 in the 40-yard dash. He had a great explosion grade. His broad jump was more average, but you can live with that. At this point on day 3, you're looking for guys who have like freakish traits or athleticism that you think can maybe, just maybe, become something of note for you that can become something that you sort of tap into as you try to develop them into players that can contribute more often. That's kind of what you're looking for. And I think that Capehart absolutely checks the box in that regard. And so I like this pick here. I thought it was a good sort of play. And I'm happy that I kind of ended up with him as a guy to address the defensive line, give that group some more depth at a position that the Browns are always kind of looking to add to. And I feel good about this pick, kind of a best player available situation, and I thought it shook out pretty well. Then I go to round 5. Sneaky need for the Browns, running back. Jerome Ford over the weekend signed with the Commanders, so he's not coming back. You kind of still need another back in this backfield, somebody that you can sort of depend on. I know they got a few guys that were, young, undrafted guys from this past year. Rocket Sanders is on the roster, obviously, and I'm actually really intrigued by him. He didn't play a lot last year, except for towards the end of the season. So it's not that they don't have some young guys that they could also fill in with. But using a draft resource to add, I think, is fair. And I really like Nicholas Singleton out of Penn State, guy who is he was a 5-star recruit out of high school and maybe got, lost a little bit in some of the ineptness of Penn State's offense at times. I think that was kind of a James Franklin problem in general. And I'm curious to kind of see what he brings at the next level. He's got a nice blend of sort of size and speed and explosiveness. And he adds another element to that running back group, which already has kind of that third down pass catching guy taken care of with Dylan Sampson. You have kind of your power guy in Quinshon, and Singleton kind of adds another power type guy to that mix. You see the PFF grade for this pick. I mean, you don't have to. That's not the end all be all, obviously. But the fact that he was still there at 147, I thought was kind of a miracle. So I like the idea of bolstering that running back room, adding another guy to the mix, and using this 5th rounder on him. And then I rounded things out because I didn't have my 7th round pick anymore. I swapped that in the trade with the Bucks. I rounded things out, and this pick is one that makes a lot of sense for the Browns if they're looking to continue to add to that tight end room. I know they signed Jack Stoll, who was previously with the Eagles and then spent last year with the Saints last week. So they've already kind of addressed the blocking side of it when it comes to the filling the void from David Njoku. But I still think it's an option for them in the draft for sure. And I think Delp there's an easy connection to make here because he was actually at Georgia when Todd Monken was there. He talked at the combine about Todd Monken coming in and recruiting him. So there's some familiarity there. Again, day 3, kind of taking a chance on a guy, and there's some upside that with him as a pass catcher. And I think his tape sort of shows a guy that can run pretty efficient routes. When he does get open, it's because he runs his routes really well, and he's pretty decisive in doing those. And he's good in sort of crossing, especially crossing the field on certain routes. I think he has good blocking techniques that probably need some refining at the NFL level. So I'd be curious to see how the Browns sort of tap into that a little bit. But Delp is an easy pick at this stage of the draft if he's there at this point. And again, with the connection with Monken, it made too much sense. Add a tight end to this mix as well. And you really look at a draft now where you overhaul the offense in a lot of different areas. And again, my only regret is that I didn't add more offensive linemen, because I do think adding multiple in this draft makes a ton of sense. So that's the mock. That's the latest for you. Carnell Tate at 6, trying to play into this idea that maybe they've used enough resources on the offensive line that they would go receiver early on. Avian Terrell at 24. I get Caleb Lomu early in the 2nd round. Zachariah Branch in the 3rd round. Garrett Nussmeier in the 4th round. Also DeMonte Capehart in the 4th round. Nicholas Singleton in the 5th round. And then Oscar Delp to round it out in the 6th round to fill out this offense at a number of different spots, add some depth, add some youth, and continue this rebuild that Andrew Berry started last week when free agency started. That's it. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts at Spencito_. You can obviously hit me up there. Also, jump in the comment section on YouTube. But if you join the Everydayer Club, you get access to that members-only Discord channel as well. LockedOnBrowns.supercast.com. Go in there, join the Everydayer Club, use code MARCH, and you'll get your first month free. It's $5 a month after that. And like I said, that Discord channel is a great place. So let me know if I had a terrible mock draft, a great mock draft. You can roast me, whatever you feel. Please go check that out as well. Also, keep it local. Check out my friends at Locked On Cavs and Locked On Guardians. Plenty more to come this week as we keep on rolling through the offseason. Thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network, or thanks for making the Locked On Browns podcast your first listen every day.